Present?
Here.
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 Thank you. Shall we stand for a pledge and Tracy leading us in an invocation? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, just give us clear heads, open hearts, and thank you for this wonderful city in which we live. Amen.
Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes.
Yes, we did.
Do we have a motion with respect to the November 9th revised minutes?
So move.
Do we
Second.
have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. That was
Nope.
November.
November 9th.
Yeah.
My name's Tim.
That's true, I did note that.
Oh, yeah, we did forget.
Yeah, no, I thought you were flexible.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion with respect to the December 14th, 2011 minutes?
I'll move adoption.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
With respect to the January 11, 2012 minutes, any discussion?
I'll move adoption.
I'll
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, next we have staff reports, public comments, and we have a request to actually move discussion item 9 up to after 6 because Mr. McKittrick's had a long day already and we can get him out of here a little earlier. Any objection to that?
No.
Okay. We will then move 9 after 6, and we'll go on to staff reports, code enforcement.
Good evening. I'm Code Officer Garcia, and I've been working the downtown redevelopment, downtown Blue Road redevelopment area. I have just been given the Midtown and Main Street to add to that. I'll be working with Code Officer Eddie Lopez. He prepared this report for you, and he was unable to attend, so I'm filling in for him. Is there any questions about any of the cases or addresses with complaints on there?
Where's my code thing?
I do, and it relates to, near the bottom, there was a noise complaint. This says 316 Main Street. Is that the Main Street?
I believe that's the Main Street station,
Okay.
yes.
I'm curious if that's the one that relates back to about Thanksgiving time.
I'm
And-
not sure. Sherry, Officer Saracusa is working on that, and it's still in the works. She's gonna.
Is that being brought before Code Enforcement Board?
I don't know. I can check into it.
Yeah, we had actually asked in November or December, and there was supposed to be follow-up at that time. If you could, if you're supposed to be here next month and such, because that was one where the police actually called me to file a complaint.
And this was for Thanksgiving.
It was about that time,
Okay.
Thanksgiving before Christmas.
Okay. Maybe I can even have her attend and reply on that.
We would really like to find out the status on that. I would
Okay.
anyways.
I have a question.
Any other questions then?
Yeah.
Tracy?
Yeah.
The dead bay trees that are all over that are just still standing, is that a code issue? How is that dealt with?
Well, if it's dead, we can cite the owner to have him remove them.
Okay.
If they're in any kind of unsafe situation.
I mean, I see them on,
Just all along Bay Street, or?
well, let me see. No,
South
no, no.
Peninsula.
I mean, they're all over. It's down Peninsula. There's one at Peninsula.
These are bay trees that
the
are
big,
dying.
huge bay trees.
Yeah.
If we can get a
There's-
list of addresses where they are, we can go look at them and see. Usually permits and licensing, there's someone there that can see if these trees are, dead, and if they can.
Oh, you
remove
can.
them.
There's no missing them.
Okay.
Do you have a number? Can we just call in the addresses to you?
Sure. 386
Uh-huh.
671 8172.
And
Eight
sir,
one.
8172.
what would the process be? How would you handle a report on a dead tree? What process would you follow with the owner of the property?
Well, like I said, we'd have to send that down to the person that deals with the trees and permits and licensing, that someone will go out and look at the tree and make sure they're dead or not. And then what we would do is cite the owner into having them remove it. We give them a certain amount of days to remove it, and if they don't, then we send them to the code board or special magistrate until compliance.
Okay.
Because a number of them are over heavily traveled streets, and Halifax and Peninsula, and they're on private property, but they hang over, the street.
The ones that are
And-
hanging over, we can have them trimmed.
Well, no, the whole tree is going to have to come down,
Okay.
Danny.
Well,
Yeah.
we'd
But
have
I
to get
mean,
someone to-
They've just been sitting there for months and not been cited, and
Okay.
so,
If we can get addresses, yeah, we
Is
can
there-
check, have
I'll
them all
get
checked
those.
out.
Is there a chance you might confer with the tree beautification board? They've issued an actual report on this problem. There is a disease killing bay
Yeah.
trees, and there's no bringing them back, there's no saving them, and they have to be brought down, because if not, they will fall down, and they have killed people in other communities. I'm wondering if there could be an expedited process to handle this, rather than go through this whole elaborate
I'll get with Ron
process.
Roberts and find out.
Yeah.
yeah, that would be great.
David?
Yeah, well, Gary kind of touched on what I was going to say. Maybe Ben or Reed can answer this. Instead of going out, identifying the tree, citing the homeowner, having them take the thing down, and like Gary said, expedite this thing. They're going to die. It's nothing that the homeowner did wrong. And if we don't get these down, it's just going to keep spreading through the entire peninsula. So why can't we, as a city, identify the problem and just start going by tree and say, this thing's dead, let's take it out, and let the city do it? I mean, I'm not a big government
Wait,
person,
let
but
the city pay for it?
Sure.
No.
Why not?
We'll have a
So
discussion.
would you rather have the tree, somebody that can't afford to take the tree down, let it fall on Peninsula?
Actually, the commission has already said no to this. That's what I'm
Well,
saying,
just-
they've
We spend money
already,
on a lot of dumb things in this city. I think this would be a good thing to spend money.
I agree, but the commission has already said no. They have
Okay.
had that, so we're sort of stuck with this.
Dennis?
We
Because
also
of-
have to find out first who owns the
Right.
tree, where
Right.
the tree is at, what's on what property.
So Tracy can get you some addresses. and
I
anyone
can.
else.
Oh, the next time you're
Would like it
driving on the
expedited, but they've already
beachside,
said no
just look
because
into the
they
tree
don't have to.
canopy. You can't miss them. They're deader than a doornail. We're talking about 75 and 80-year-old bay trees, huge trees.
All the leaves turn brown, and you can tell. I mean, and they're not falling off.
Well, once she gives me all the addresses, we'll send, I
Okay.
mean, we do operations, and if we have to, it may be an operation when everybody can get down there and look at all these,
Any other board questions or comments? Thank you, officer.
Last fall.
Is that it?
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you.
Danny.
Okay, moving on to public comments. Name and address in 3 minutes, please.
I'll bring back the next time. John Nicholson, 413 North Grandview Avenue. These you can find at Laz on Seabreeze, and you can find them in the office upstairs, but nowhere else. It's parking. It's something that I ask you that I think we need to have. They don't include all the public parking and private parking for people to park. It's something that I think that we should have. And I talked to a business owner. They'd like to have it in their stores. There are 3 copies.
Who publishes that?
Laz Parking.
Okay, well, can they be contacted and the business owner pick them up there, or?
I have no idea. They're bad. They have to be redone anyway. So
Yeah, how, are you pointing out to them the errors in
I
their?
already did the staff upstairs.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sure you talked about it. I missed it when you had a discussion on your agenda for the budget. I know you talked about it at length, but I missed when you all discussed it. But when you go back and look at your budget notes, I pulled up something.
Isn't that on for tonight?
You don't have a full-time person. You were charged $208,000 for budgeting for salaries. Midtown, who has a full-time person, only pays 140. Downtown has a full-time person, and they pay 140. You're missing this person, and you pay 208. So I would ask you to kind of look at your budget to explain to me why you're paying more money if you don't have the staff. You will have a sheet, a long one, looks like this with a little circle to it. One of the merchants on Main, off of Atlantic Avenue, asked if I could come up with an idea of how to spread New Year's Eve along Atlantic Avenue and make it encompass more of the merchants, the restaurants, and other businesses. So I did that. There's another sheet folded in half, says tournaments, possible sponsors. What that does is it says all the possible things that we could have on the beach side to fill up hotels, to have venues. These are just things that came to mind. These are people or places like the Speedway has a place to have a venue. David Lamont would be interested in surfing. So you've got a correlation between people and venues and events. I came up with a lot of things. There are a lot of things that we can do on the beach side to bring tourists into town. You have the large circle that looks like this. It's the area in front of the Hilton. 2-3 years ago, we took out the jungle gym that was in the front. We've never replaced it. I don't know why. I came up with 28 to 30 different events in that area. It would go from the Hilton all the way to the beach. The more things we have for kids under 12, we're supposed to be tourist-friendly, family-friendly. Other than the water park, we don't really have a venue to bring these kids to the boardwalk and to the area. Then another one says Beach Center. That's the area right underneath the Space Needle. There's like 35 pilings there. You can't drive through it if you wanted to anyway. I was thinking of enclosing it and allowing the gentleman that does the parasailing to have that space to bring in parasailing, the banana boat, kayaking, all that venues that they have on beaches everywhere else. We could have it right there at the pier. It's very visible from the boardwalk. And the last thing, if I have a couple of seconds, you spent $550,000 on the properties on Grandview. You got 2 properties. You will recoup probably about $200,000. You'll lose about $300,000. Remember Ken Paz wanted like $20, $30, or $40,000 to redo a house? So instead of paying $150,000 as a loss on the Grandview properties, if we did Ken Paz's to convert them back to single families, you could save $100,000 or more on each property that he or anybody else converts back to a single family.
Thanks, John.
That should be 3 minutes.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
I would just point out one thing. There's supposed to be a staff report tonight. This is the February meeting on the budget, correct? That's on our update. Aren't we
For-
having a staff report on the
Yes.
CRA, yes, the
Yes.
budget?
Yes, we're going
Yes.
to cover it at that
It's
point.
not like we missed it, right?
No, it's
Okay,
it's
thank
in
you.
your staff report,
Yeah,
and I will present.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Neil Harrington, 101 Grand Oak Circle. Just a request. You used to do a ComStat for the beach side. I wonder if when you're going to have the next report available on that.
I think they're coming
Quarterly.
quarterly now.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. All right, moving on then to item number 6, the request to approve fixed awnings. Is that you, Reed?
That is me. Right now, I don't see the applicant here. I knew he was going to have some issues trying to get here this evening, but this is a request for placing an awning out in front of his property. And
By the way, the applicant went to a show and he's kind of like stuck in traffic trying to get back. He did call me, and if there's questions, I might be able to handle them.
These are 7 fabric awnings.
there's 7 of them, and there's a plan view, I believe, in your packet there showing those. But the issue is that because they're what he's replacing with is a fixed awning, an architectural type awning, the question is it compatible, consistent with the type of architecture that's there? And that's a judgment on that you have to make. We have an attempt here not only to put the awnings up. One of the concerns was there was like Mediterranean red roof tile on top. We said, well, that doesn't look like it's going to work. But the property owner stated that they would be replacing some of the facade, so it'll look very much like the roof across the street where the Salty Dog Surf Shop is. So the pictures are provided there for you to show you the how it looks currently with those fabric awnings, and those will be replaced with the architectural metal awnings and some, not the entire roof. You won't see it like this, but you'll see more of the facade. If I go back to
Is it the visible parts?
the visible, you see where the
Red?
the tile is?
Right.
There would be actually an cover there for the roof that'll be like a mansard type of angled roof. It'll have the same angle as the awning would have coming down, so you'd see that corrugated look. And
Everywhere where there's currently red, there would be gray.
that's the intent, yes. That's
Like-
how it's been
okay.
described.
It would be like the metal roof.
That's my understanding, at the corners and over the main entry point.
And do we have this is the drawing of the metal roof that's going to be replaced?
No,
That's
sir.
a product.
This is just the
I mean, the
awning,
awning.
just of the awning, yes.
He texted me a picture of the metal awning look that he's going to be replacing it with. If you want me, I could pass it.
Yeah.
my
Would you
phone.
please?
That would be great.
Yeah, because that's what's missing.
While
Yeah,
while
and
we're
then-
doing that,
And then what
Troop-
he's saying, in addition to that, is that he's going to replace the tile with the same type of metal look, so that way
Same
it'll
as
all
yours.
match.
That's correct.
Does that mean these supports underneath are going to be visible like that?
Yes.
Tru-
I don't know, because in the,
Are these, what's it look like under these?
in the
It's going to
elevation.
disappear, you might have to press the middle button to get it back.
Because if you
We
look
got
at the
it.
picture in the awning here, that the ends are capped. Well, you'll see them from underneath, just like you do on any other awning.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
But
What's
see,
underneath
even
that?
If you look in the pictures
Right, I
here,
saw that.
Yeah, they're capped inside the
And he also told me that-
showing you what the awning-
He also,
The outside of it.
Yeah.
he also told me he would have his phone on him, you know, if we had any questions for him, I could actually call him.
Can we put them at the podium?
Yeah.
Do you know what building that is?
Excuse me?
Do you know what building that is?
That's, he actually took that picture from a Dollar General store.
But if we go off the picture that he's got, where he's got the specifications in there, it shows that the ends are capped, where those are open-ended. and that
Right.
goes
Yeah, that,
Yeah, the picture shows how
Looks
they
better
were.
than a hard awning for the end to be open. When you start capping the ends, they start looking cheesy, they really do. But what you usually see is a little more of an architectural grade frame than maybe a.
Right.
yeah, that's what, that frame is,
Kind of where it looks more like a bracket, and it is exposed, and that's more, closing the ends off with that metal usually don't work out too good.
Looks like a hood for a.
Yeah.
A hood vent.
You got that corner then there to deal with, how do you, the vertical and the slope, is how they join together. So it probably look better if it was done like that, than like this shot drawing here shows with the capped ends actually.
Reed or Dino, do we know if there's a time issue on this proposal, or could he come back next month and,
If there's a specific question, one second.
okay.
you can't really do this.
No, yeah, I'm thinking that maybe there's a way to send the picture from the phone so we can get it on the computer.
So
We've
it's
got-
public.
We've got somebody from IT here who probably can help us figure
Well,
that
you
out.
know what I would suggest? Why don't I make a motion to put this at the end of the agenda? I'll call him because
He
he's
may-
stuck in traffic.
Okay.
That way he has time to come to the meeting because obviously this is probably not the right meeting.
Any objection?
No, I think that's a good idea, but the point of being able to get
That.
that on this is still a valid.
Point.
Can you email that?
Well, yes, I could.
All right. We'll get an email address and,
Well, if we don't get it up on the TV, at least we can promise to send the pictures in
Yeah.
for the record at some point.
Right, that's what I was thinking, public record. Okay,
okay.
Because we
It's-
like to ask them at the ends are going to be.
Okay.
They're going to be.
And I have other questions at that time as well. So
okay.
Good, so we will just move
Just
that
move that
till
down.
near the end of the
Okay.
agenda. And then we can move on
Parking.
to what was item 9,
Oh. That's right, I forgot.
dealing with the itinerant vending and special events
Okay.
issue. And we have, is Paul here? Ah, there he is. Paul McKittrick's going to explain the process a little bit to us. And I think we'll go with that first unless there's some other plan, Reed. So if Paul wants to head home, he can do so.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Rita's told me a little bit about your interest in itinerant vending. Can I assume that we're speaking about itinerant vending during motorcycle events on Main Street? Is that a safe assumption, or should I talk about itinerant vending in general throughout the city? What would you like to hear about?
Both would be appreciated.
Both, and where we were also coming from on part of it, the E-zone, you know, one of the recommendations in that was dealing with itinerant vending. And so that's actually what sort of led to this.
Okay, let me ramble a little bit, and I'll start with the very general, and then we'll kind of work our way down to something more specific. Our City Code of Ordinances describes the types of business licenses that can be issued throughout the city. And our zoning code has specific types of business activities that can be permitted pursuant to whatever's a permitted or conditional use in commercial zoning districts. So for many years, again, I've been here for many years, for as long as I've been here, we routinely have issued itinerant vendor business licenses, which I believe is Chapter 94 of the City Code, to people who want to sell furniture or furs or other products from within buildings. That used to be fairly common from hotels on oceanfront properties, where somebody come in for a weekend and they'd have like a little estate sale or sell racing souvenirs during speed weeks. They'd be within a building. Zoning code allowed for retail at that property, and they'd purchase an itinerant vendor license for, I believe it was $200. And we rarely got a complaint about that. It was always within a building. And again, it didn't happen often, but it happened often enough. It wasn't uncommon. Getting a little bit more specific, we used to have itinerant vending along West International Speedway Boulevard around the Speedway, folks selling T-shirts and other racing memorabilia, and that had evolved. This was actually, I believe, in the 70s, where the city allowed one itinerant vendor for every 100 feet, and then it became one per property. And then it was, I believe, the early 90s when it was decided that that was still too many. And itinerant vending along West ISB during speed weeks was disallowed, but there was a special provision made for racing souvenir vending at the track. And during a typical speed weeks or Coke Zero event, while you may see some TPAs, temporary promotional activity permits, in the vicinity of the track where people are selling racing souvenirs, for example, over at 2525 West ISB, we have a year-round NASCAR racing memorabilia store, and they're allowed to then pull a TPA and do that. So sometimes that's mistaken for itinerant vendor. During spring break, we allow no itinerant vending outside of a building. It was a big issue during Black College Reunion. We were always dealing with that. Again, it was never authorized, but it would happen, and we would try to take enforcement action. The only time that itinerant vending outside of buildings has been sanctioned by the City Commission on a per-event basis has been during motorcycle events. And that started with the master plan process, which was kind of created out of thin air around 1990. You know, before, I think it was Paul Crow that came on board in 1988, and you all know the story about the resurrection of Bike Week at the time. And I don't have a lot of clear recollection of that period, but again, with the kind of resurgence or renewal of Bike Week, it's my impression that that's when itinerant vending on Main Street really kind of took hold. If you'd like me to, I could explain the master plan process.
Can you, Paul, could you explain Article 17 and how that came to existence?
Let me get my backup out. I believe it's on the second page of your backup. It's the small print. Is a section of our Land Development Code, which is Article 17, Section 2.111, titled Outside Activities and Uses. And I'm looking specifically at 6.8, where it says by resolution the commission may authorize temporary outside activities in distressed or blighted areas, to paraphrase, to promote festivals which will helpfully promote economic development in the area. I can't tell you specifically when that provision was inserted, but I'm going to assume it's in the early 1990s. It was the provision that basically created the master plan process. To the best of my knowledge, it's only used twice a year, once for Bike Week and once for Biketoberfest. And again, it is restricted to designated distressed and blighted areas, which is a euphemism for designated redevelopment areas. It's always meant that. So over the years, when we've had people come in and they wanted to have itinerant vending in their parking lots at a hotel, for example, north of Seabreeze, it's not a designated redevelopment area. Weren't even going to entertain an application for it.
Actually, I can tell you when it came in because I was on the commission. So that was mid-90s. Is there a difference? Okay, the way that reads, let's say I'm in Midtown or downtown and it's not a bike event, it's the art festival. Is that, how do those kinds of things work? Or is that itinerant vending? Is that TPA? What is that?
That's an excellent question. The Halifax Art Festival, for example, is permitted through our Cultural Services Department because the activity is supposed to be taking place on public property, a public park, a public sidewalk, a public street. And in our City Code of Ordinances, we have procedures and permit fees for that type of activity. If somebody wanted to do something in Oceanfront Park or in Riverfront Park, or in the case of the Art Festival, they're out in the street when we block the street. It's not done through a master plan process pursuant to Article 17. It's done through a city code process.
Okay. So farmers market, same thing. So those.
Well, that's a different one.
Okay.
That's a 30-year-old lease, which was just revamped and readopted by the commission a couple months ago. But that is done. That's kind of a standalone lease that the city commission has done with the DDA.
Okay. So Article 17, the only thing that it's used for now are the bike events. And reading this, the pool deck concerts, do those still, like spring break pool deck concerts,
yeah,
things
actually,
like that?
I think at the back of that, there's a provision that said that it sunsetted after 2 years. So in the new Clarion Code, that section just goes away because it's no longer relevant. The whole outdoor concert on pool deck section.
Right, that will disappear
if we had
after-
other pages, you would see that it's no longer effective because there was, I think, a 2-year sunset originally on it. It just never came out of the code.
Okay. So you can't do pool deck concerts anymore?
No, and
Unless
to the best of
it's-
my knowledge, we haven't had a request for one for years.
Okay, okay,
That was the Glenn Storch amendment.
okay.
Well, I do see music though, that means
Yeah.
concert live performance.
Yeah, but this was actually, rock and roll bands
Yeah, this
drawing a
was-
bunch of patrons from Central Florida. It was the famous Texan pool deck of 1989.
Boy, that was a great.
Like when I was on MG,
Were you on MTV?
yeah,
Yeah, you were, okay. You and Mr. Lamont?
no, I don't, no.
I was too busy working that weekend.
And then I had one other question. I don't know who supplied the 6-year comparison of, vendor revenues that we're looking at and stuff, but do we have anything that gives us the cost to the city? What,
And I can provide that.
police, traffic, garbage?
We can provide that. The city commission also asked for that recently. We had a couple of versions go out, and they were put out by the finance department.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I saw some of the versions, for example, I had some questions about some of the numbers. It's my understanding that finance has now kind of vetted a whole new fact sheet on costs and revenues for recent events. And if you haven't already heard, the city commission intends to have a workshop in the next several weeks to talk about costs and fees for special events and facility fees. And it's going to be an interesting workshop because there's going to be many, many different things discussed, but one of them will be special events costs and fees.
Reed, could you make sure that we all know when that workshop is going to occur?
I will.
Thank you. So Paul, in looking at the 6-year comparison that was attached here, it looks like there's been roughly 40 to 50% drop in number of vendors and fees over this 6-year period.
Correct.
Do you have any recollection as to what it may have been prior to that? Has it dropped even more from when the process got started, or?
Yeah, I have to say regretfully that our record keeping going further back is pretty spotty. I have seen some stuff from like 2000, but I wish I could show you something consistent from, say, 1990 on. I can't do that. I think that the high number of 2005, for example, where we had 267 vendors, that would be on MMB, Beach Street, and Main Street. And let me say, too, that's outside of buildings and within buildings. That's vendors, all vendors.
Okay.
That's probably a high. 267 is a lot of vendors.
Yeah, that was.
Okay, so that's probably the peak period, you think, for the vendors? Okay.
Going back to the Article 17 question, too, because this came up when the City Commission was considering a police user fee, the master plan only authorizes exceptions to outside activities. Many of the vendors, primarily on Main Street, are within buildings. They could be permitted any day of the year because the zoning allows retail activities. And again, our city code allows for us to issue a business tax receipt, is the technical term, a business license, for whatever temporary period of time they want to operate. Inside the building. And that's one of the, that was one of the issues with the commission's decision to rescind the police user fee, in that it only applied to certain businesses who were in the master plan. Not all the bars were in the master plan.
Because they do stuff inside?
The exception was Wise Guys, which basically has no outside activity area. So they're not in the master plan. So the concept that we were going to assign a police officer to every bar because we had an issue was kind of fundamentally flawed, because there was at least one bar that wasn't in the master plan. That's why I think the commission agreed we needed to kind of go back and look at it. It needed to be very consistent in the application of that surcharge.
So then you could argue, and I know that in several law cases over property on Main Street, it was argued that the allowance of outside vending rather than the maintenance of inside only is what has brought about the devaluation of the street. That it's more lucrative to operate out of an open lot than it is to maintain a building for 12 months. What do you have an
Was that a question?
Does the city have an opinion on, you heard it before, when the hotel came down, that was a major point of controversy in that lawsuit.
Well, I don't speak for the city. I've heard that before. I've heard many people say that the value of properties on Main Street, the value as determined by the Volusia County property appraiser, is based not on their year-round business activity, but on the income generated during those two special events. And that is one of the factors that is decreased interest in year-round businesses on Main Street.
If you remember the Urban Land Institute that was commissioned by the merchants on Main Street.
Is your microphone on? I'm having a hard time hearing you, actually.
Yeah, I said if you remember the Urban Land Institute study that was, I think, commissioned by the Main Street Merchants Association, they came to the same conclusion. And I guess these are sort of not questions, but statements, because we have, I guess, a community-wide discussion coming up by the commission and by groups throughout our community about the viability of continued outdoor, outside itinerant vending. I'm glad we cleared up the issue about the Arts Festival. I didn't think that arts festivals would be affected by the removal of outside itinerant vending, and I'm glad that's clear. I didn't think Article 17 was applicable. I see the Urban Land Institute study. I understand that the budget that we'll be looking at in the future, a couple of minutes, contains a line item for rent subsidies for landlords on Main Street in an attempt to get properties back rented year-round rather than kept vacant for special events. And while these are anecdotal bits of information, they sort of add up, I think, to a motion that seems to be developing steam in our community that is reflected in the E-zone, also in the E-zone recommendations. And so any data that you could give us, Paul, any revised data, I didn't think that the budget at the end of the report reflected everything, and probably things that shouldn't be there as well as things that are not there. Any update would be deeply appreciated. I'm not sure whether or not we are ever specifically asked by the commission for our opinion, but I know that the commission looks forward to receiving advice from its advisory boards, and I would hate to think that we would have to be tasked for our opinion, but rather than that, that we would be willing to weigh in on an issue that is so significant to Main Street and the E-zone and the redevelopment area.
Okay. Any other questions for Paul?
I had one, actually, when you were talking about the vacancies on Main Street. I know there was a big impact when there was, just like on Mary McLeod Bethune, when they did the streetscape and how long that took. But other than that, is there a way of finding out how many buildings we've lost so we can have open lots for vending, or?
I don't know that we still have them in the building. I'm sure they've got them in the library, but the old Polk reports, I think, could probably help us. Remember the big books that had all the addresses and you could cross-reference by phone number and address and business name?
Oh, actually, I think those are in the Halifax Historical.
Yeah,
Those old, okay.
Yeah, I think with the internet, they might be a little bit out of date, but the library may keep them up, because again, there was a cost for them, so we probably abandoned that a while ago. But there is a way to go back to, say, 1990 or 1980, and just go down Main Street and see how many business names are there.
Yeah, because I just remember Jerry Langston one time standing right where you are, when I was sitting right over where Ben is, saying that the unintended consequence of vending, and this is, he hasn't been with the city in a while.
2000.
Yeah, but the unintended consequence has been the loss of buildings. You know, it makes more sense to bring down a building and have an empty lot and have it be contiguous and use it.
Right.
So.
Okay. Tim?
Paul, when the CRA and the redevelopment area were set up, part of the criteria
Microphone, Tim, please.
to set up the CRA was that the whole entire area was considered blighted.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there a distinction between just, let's say, Main Street and the Main Street redevelopment area, and not opening up, let's say, itinerant vending to the entire redevelopment area, or not allowing it for the entire area?
You know, that's another very good question. As the master plan evolved, and I can't even tell you when the first set of guidelines were created. I could do the research on that. That might be an interesting question too. But incorporated into the guidelines adopted by the City Commission, it says what you can do and where you can do it. And for motorcycle events, it's very specific as to what streets the businesses can front on to be eligible for the outside activities. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And it's Main Street, it's a section of North Beach Street, and it's a section of MMB, and it's a piece of Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Period.
Now, what, you know, we kind of, I think we repeat that in the adopting resolutions for the master plans, but again, that map, so to speak, is something that the commissions have reviewed regularly, because we're constantly tweaking the guidelines, I mean, frankly, on an annual or biannual way. And
now, and to my recollection, back when everything started in the late 80s with all this, part of it, the impetus was to generate some income for people to be able to reinvest into their properties and things like that to help spur growth on the street. And you mentioned Beach Street, which is out of our jurisdiction, but the north end of Beach Street, where itinerant vending is allowed, it's pretty vacant on that side, and the other end where it's not, you see that there is kind of an upswing in that area. Do you think itinerant vending has caused that downturn? And I know this is just your opinion.
Well, you know, again, we can really do some historical research if that's the level of detail that the board would like. it'd be interesting to me, for example, to see if the guidelines predated Harley-Davidson on Beach Street, if they were then amended to allow for itinerant vending around the Rossmeyer building. I can't remember if we had vending on North Beach Street before Rossmeyer.
You know, I don't believe so.
So
we didn't.
we allowed it because of Rossmeyer. Now,
It started off with them having the vending
in the city park.
in the city park across the street.
The
you
Tom
know,
Selleck.
and then-
yeah.
And that was Tom, but not,
Yeah.
not Harley Davidson.
But if you're saying, you know, are the car lots vacant now because of itinerant vending, I think there's 100 factors as to why those car lots are vacant. And I'm sure you've all heard that those car lots will not have any vending during Bike Week.
Finally?
Well, the owner has agreed, they made a business decision. You know, and I didn't see their numbers, I wasn't part of that decision-making, but they decided that they would just prefer to take down the buildings, do the landscaping improvements that were approved by the downtown board, and then they'll make it available for free or paid parking, but, you know, when they want to. And, you know, we're thankful for that, because hopefully they'll be cooperative, and when we have events at Manatee Island, we'll be able to make that public available. But, you know, did itinerant vending cause the demise of the car lots? In my opinion, no.
Dino?
On the subject on Main Street, and it was brought up about the E-zone, talked about itinerant vending, and another subject that the E-zone brought up is the lack of parking in the area. And John, I guess, passed out this map earlier, and you see all these Ocean Center parking lots that are there that are closed down. And if you wanted, and I talked to a property owner on Main Street, and he made a valid point to say that if you're trying to turn Main Street into a family-oriented place year-round, the Ocean Center parking lots need to be open year-round. And the point that he made is, would you park in the, you know, Ocean Walk parking garage and walk all the way around to Main Street to visit one of those shops? And the answer is no. Now, what is the deal that we have with the parking garages authority? I mean, is it that any parking lots that are there have to be metered, or I know that there's some kind of...
The city and the county agreed before the construction of the parking garage commenced that we would, by resolution or ordinance, create a controlled parking area, which I believe goes from Oak Ridge to Harvey. It just came up the other day. I should have remembered that quicker. And all parking within that area would be either restricted to residents, or there would be some charge put in place. And that's obviously to not have a proliferation of free parking surrounding a paid parking garage and just undercutting the ability of the garage to.
But Main Street has free parking on Main Street.
Correct.
So there was an exception made for that.
Yep.
Well, can there be exceptions made to the Ocean Center parking lots? Can we somehow, I mean, we're in this
I think it's
together.
easier than amending a resolution or ordinance. I think it's a matter of going to Don Poor and paying him to keep his parking lots open.
Well,
It's
I
just-
think that should be a priority of this board.
Actually, the E-zone plan, made the determination, and I think there's actually a schedule in there, that as certain development occurs, certain additional parking must be constructed, but at this time, there's sufficient parking if it's better managed. And, the charge is then on us to find some way to better manage the existing parking. So, again, if the board feels that there'd be a significant benefit to having one or more of the Ocean Center parking lots open on a daily or year-round basis, we can have that conversation with Mr. Poor. But I know what it's gonna take. It's gonna take this.
Money, yeah.
Okay.
Because he's gonna have to staff it. And if it's free, then we're gonna be paying for the parking on behalf of the people, which is $5 or $10 a day.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be staffed?
Because they don't have any kind of gate system, as I recall. Every time I go to an event there, it's manned.
It's free. But if it's free, they could be open and you can park there like you go to the mall.
We need to have that conversation with
We do.
Mr. Poor. I mean, every director that's been there,
Yeah.
we've had this same conversation.
Yeah, it may involve a discussion above Mr. Poor's level, so.
Okay.
Any questions or comments on this end for Paul?
Just a comment. We have been attending some movies recently, and they have got someone from the Beach Patrol as you get off the ramp there when the movies get out for protection.
I had just I'm sorry, were you still? Okay. The master plan guidelines that we were given, those are in our code of ordinances?
No, they're adopted by resolution. They're not incorporated in the city code or the land development code.
Okay, so would that be why, for instance, when I look under what was, we have section 7, amplified sound, which is the next to the last page. A sound that is a level that is acceptable to the community standard?
Yes.
Is that why we don't have anything in there that says that we actually have a noise ordinance and there are not only standards, there are, okay, so what, or the fees, the master plan application fees, who are those paid to?
They're paid to the chamber, but we have 100% pass through to the city, so they
Okay.
collect and then give it to
They
us.
just do, because they do all the okay. So if these master plan guidelines needed to be changed, because sound's a huge problem, how do these go about getting changed? So it would reflect that we actually have a noise ordinance and there are actually measurable decibel levels that have nothing to do with acceptable to the community standard.
The way that we've always done this is that the city commission has acted without input from either the planning board or the redevelopment boards, because you've got Midtown Board and Downtown Board and Main Street Board. And for example, if you look at the bottom of that page 4 that talked about sound and fees, you'll see that this was last amended in September
Right, I was
2011 when we did a little
To the
trick on setup
contiguous
and a
and-
couple
yeah.
of things like that. And that's generally what happens, is that a commissioner will come forward and say, you know, I want to make an amendment to this. Commissions are generally agreeable to that. We work out the language, either with or without the chamber, bring it back, and at one public hearing before the city commission, it's amended.
One interesting note on that, Paul, is if you've
Okay.
got any bars that aren't under the master plan, they wouldn't fall under these standards that are in the resolution. They would have to fall under the noise ordinance, and,
Oh, they have to fall under the noise ordinance.
well, they don't think they do, but, well, no, this is not.
This is not the noise
consistent with the
ordinance.
noise ordinance.
That's what I'm asking.
It's not consistent at all.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about this 8 or 9 years ago, and you may remember that the chamber got very involved in it. That's when actually the cycling down, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., et cetera, was inserted in there, because it used to simply be acceptable to a community standard, period.
I think that they should have some decimal requirements in there, not just say, and lower further on section 7. It says you got lower further at 1 a.m., lower further at 2 a.m. I think there should be some guidelines. I
Well-
mean, what's further?
That's what we're gonna get to. This is
Yeah.
just for education discussion, and then ideas to look at through Bike Week and such, and come back and discuss what we think should be revised to make it more consistent with the E-zone plan and such. So, and I have some issues about that too, but we'll save those for another day.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else for Paul?
Yeah, I did want to add this historical note, and some of you will know what I'm talking about. A lot of the guidelines came about because of one person, Benny Carvagno.
Right, right.
Benny was such a force of nature that he got, for example, the outside activities can be related to what you do year-round or what you're licensed for. Benny got the sound standard, Benny got this, Benny got that. Some of you are smiling because most of us
He came
remember-
after me one time.
Yeah, he came after me too.
Hey, save.
More than once.
I think we've all been.
But Benny's fingerprints are all over that, and, you know, God bless Benny.
Mr. Chairman,
Gary.
Ben, does the agreement with the chamber using the language community standards for sound trump the city ordinance?
Well, an ordinance controls over a resolution.
Okay,
And I would look at those standards as sort of lying side by side.
yeah.
Okay.
So the ordinance is a
The timeline of the
controlling.
resolution, though, and what are in here are inconsistent on their face.
Excuse me?
The timelines within the noise ordinance, as far as when music is permitted and what is within the guidelines there, are inconsistent, because these allow them to, I think, 2:45, and I think the noise ordinance, you have to be shut down at 2 o'clock.
That's correct.
And that's one inconsistency. And what I'll be bringing up later on is that I don't know any other place in the country that allows outside amplified sound anywhere near residents, anything near after midnight. But
You know, one caveat I need to give you is without looking at the sound ordinance, there may be a way for those two things to fit together. We're making an assumption that there's a conflict, but
yeah.
I'd have to research that and verify it. But assuming that the ordinance without exception created a decibel limit, that it's an ordinance, so.
Yeah,
law.
that's controlling. The ordinance would control the, no matter, well, I guess.
Ben, that might be a good
Finding out that.
Yeah.
discussion to have with the police department and such before we get into Bike Week.
Mr. Chairman, I think the discussion needs to go from us to the commission, because
Well,
obviously, when the chamber goes to the commission and says everybody has agreed we're going to go to 245 or 315, they say sure. And if the chamber suggests, well, let's go to community standards because there really is no, it's a relative term, and everybody agrees with us here, and all the bar owners said we think it's a good idea, the commission says sure. So I think we are not exercising our responsibility if we don't share with the commission as the CRA some of these inconsistencies.
Paul, hasn't this master plan already been approved by the city commission?
For Bike Week, it has.
Bike
Week,
yeah.
You know, I would encourage everybody,
So-
including Mr. Gross, to go out during Bike Week and directly observe it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and actually, it might be hard to do those very specific measurements because of all the ambience
It's
noise
impossible,
during-
that was the
right.
point.
Right.
The motorcycle noise prevented any kind of accurate measurement of sound from private property. The measurement couldn't take place.
That's why I'm not
That
sure
is
the
correct.
conflict is real. The community standard's a separate sort of reasonable person standard that can be enforced on its own.
Well, the time would be real.
Yeah.
That's pretty real.
And Ben, the community standards were superseded by the decibel levels for a reason.
Well, and the decibel levels, well, actually, the decibel levels in the ordinance dropped down to, I think, at midnight to like 60 or 70,
But I think Paul's point is if.
which is not loud at all.
I think Paul's point, if the city were to try to enforce decibel limits in a court of law, because of the way the ambience noise is situated during.
With the
Bike,
motorcycles.
The city wouldn't be able to enforce that.
But it does also have the subjective standard as to what a reasonable person would tolerate within the noise ordinance. Yes, Teresa?
I think the difficulty is determining the source of the.
Teresa?
objective.
We can't hear you.
Oh,
The difficulty is determining the precise source of the sound that is too loud.
it's not difficult, Teresa.
Well,
And I'm not
to
sure.
get it stand up in
No,
court might be.
it's one thing to have a decibel meter and try to, because the noise ordinance is written that you have to be 100 feet from the property line. And so between that 100 feet, you got all these other noises coming in on you with bikes roaring by and such. But it's very easy to tell if a band at Boot Hill or Main Street Station or Wise Guys, which are really, I think, the three worst offenders, or Wreck It sometimes, but they're not in it this year. Whether they have music that's blowing out at 95 to 100 decibels. It's very easy to tell that. That's not a problem, and you can differentiate that, perhaps not with a decibel meter, but by simply standing there and listening to it and being a block away and listening to it at a very loud level. You can tell that they're a major factor in creating the noise level, and then the other bands are competing against them, and everybody's trying to compete against each other and get louder and louder, and so they're saying, oh, well, now everybody's in on it. No, then they're all in on it. So it's not hard to tell.
Well, if I may.
Please. Sorry.
Yeah. First, I'd like to say I think what we have here is we are all the victims of bad zoning. And these areas have developed as they have, and it's most unfortunate because it makes it, if I owned your home, I wouldn't want Bike Week going on, a block away either. However, the businesses recognize that these bike events are their grand opportunity to do significant volume to help get them through the year. City Commission over the years has worked extensively with the Bike Week Task Force in developing the guidelines. And like Mr. McKittrick said, they're often revised and adjusted and tweaked. During the events, the city has a compliance officer from the police department who visits the properties and makes sure that these adjustments are being made in the sound volume. So as I see it, the city has made a good effort at controlling the sound levels during these events. And suffice to say that our lives are not perfect, and life in this little zone right here is not perfect. And the residences and us businesses are trying to adjust and get along, so.
And I agree, and that's what this is about, is what can we do to make the whole area a whole lot better and consistent with the E-zone plan, and make it a year-round thriving business that has the residences and everybody interacting and enjoying life out there and making money. That's what it's all about.
But the other thing is, I still think we might be engaging in some assumptions about how noise is enforced during Bike Week. I haven't been involved in code enforcement, but I don't think code enforcement is enforcing that provision of the master plan guidelines when it enforces noise violations. And it seems to me that one thing that provision does in the master plan guidelines is it gives the city the ability to review how people have acted in previous events when they're determining whether to allow people to do a permanent activity next year. I'm not sure that community standard, even if the city wasn't going to be given a hard time for trying to enforce a resolution through code enforcement, I'm not sure that community standard means anything different than the reasonable person standard that's still in the code regardless. So the assumption that the resolution is an effort to trump the code, I'm not sure it's there.
But Ben, you might just take a look at the timing between the two of them about consistency, because that may be a black and white issue.
And why have the resolution? If there's no problem.
Yeah, I mean, if it's already in the ordinance, then.
I have one other question, just
Okay.
to,
Let's
the
see
last.
if we can get
it's
Paul
the
out of
last-
here.
Yeah, it's the last question. When exactly did itinerant vending start?
You know, my guess is around 1990.
Okay. That's about what I thought. Outdoor, yeah, I'm talking about itinerant vending outdoor, non-TPA, not, the TPA is for the business owner, correct?
Right.
To have, but the outside activities.
And I will look around. Again, you asked for some additional information, and hopefully that's in the record. We'll get that to you before the next meeting.
Okay.
And if you're interested to see if there is actually, you know, like a start date on itinerant vending on Main Street, we'll look for that too.
Thank you.
Sure.
So we're not looking at us to do anything tonight. You're just going to come
This
back
is
to us
more
at the
info-
next
no,
Yeah,
meeting.
this is a
this is just
discussion.
conceptual and to see what issues are out there and get educated a little bit.
Okay, well, when you get back to us, can you look into the parking situation also? Because I think,
But
Yeah.
yeah, Reed and I talk with Don regularly. We'll have that conversation.
Paul, I know you want to go, just to piggyback onto her, when the itinerant vending started, Article 17 and all that, was there never an ending date to that article? Or was it just open-ended, never to sunset?
It was never written into the code to sunset, but we are doing a complete rewrite of the land development code.
correct.
Now, my instruction to Clarion, the consultant who's doing the rewrite with many of the sections of the code, was you can reformat it, but don't change the wording dramatically, don't change the meaning of the provisions. So what you'll see eventually with what's now in Article 17, Section C8, it'll be somewhere in the code, and it may be worded a little bit different, but it's going to have the same message. And the city commission, I'm just being blunt about this, the city commission is going to have an opportunity to kind of reaffirm their interest in continuing with master plans.
Or not.
Or not, with 10,000 provisions in the land development
Sure.
code. I mean, there is A lot of it is just reformatting the existing code, but you're going to be very interested to see some of the new stuff in there. Tracy spent quite a bit of time on it. Okay?
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it
Sure.
very much.
Thanks,
Everybody
Paul.
have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
What I'd like to do now is, I just noted a few things in the E-zone plan that I just want to bring to the attention and put on the record as a point to go forward with the discussion of what I believe are what we should be considering as revisions to the master plan process or other special events and such to make things more consistent with the E-zone plan. And what I want to do is I'm just going to cite to the E-zone plan on page 15 under the master plan cornerstone principles. The purpose of the cornerstones is to provide guidance and direction to planning and development in the E-zone district. The list of cornerstones serves to summarize key goals for the district redevelopment and to identify the primary characteristics and traits that should be fulfilled in the implementation of the master plan. And right under that is provide a unique offering, including the bullets of feature the beach and augment it with a comfortable, walkable, sustainable inland environment, tell the whole story from the beach to the river, which I think is Main Street. Establish a conduit to discover all of Daytona Beach's destinations, events, cultural and recreational offerings, including the Halifax riverfront. Attract Central Florida residents to come here for dining and entertainment. Provide activities that augment events to create year-round economic activity. Manage and coordinate events and activities with other city programs. On page 17, under the heading, provide assurances of operational standards, a few of the items are enforce local ordinances in the public realm to maintain a safe, quality environment. Amend local regulations to promote vital pedestrian activity along retail corridors to allow outdoor dining. Address and manage itinerant vending issue to ensure benefit for entire Daytona Beach economy. Work with businesses to provide ongoing consistency and quality in hotel room, dining, retail, and entertainment offerings. Under the heading, promote livable and stable neighborhoods, it provides for preserve and enhance significant historic structures, address the lack of quality housing and resident ownership, more establish strong pedestrian links to the beach at many points along the coast, buffer neighborhoods from active event areas through design and program operations. Back on page 21, there's a heading of office and residential space where it says there's limited near-term demand for office residential uses within the E-zone. These uses would likely develop organically over time above retail space that is built along Main Street. It is anticipated that the development can accommodate approximately 80 condo apartment units that could be built over time. And on page 22, under the master plan elements, there's a keyed master plan attached, and some of the items are as Main Street, retail, dining, entertainment, upper condo apartment, housing, and office. The Seabreeze neighborhood's a factor with respect to the E-zone. Surfside Village neighborhood, a West Main Street retail, dining, entertainment, some upper condo apartments as another item, with a buffer to the neighborhood behind. The Riverfront condo hotel. So I just want to bring to everyone's attention that that's what the E-zone is calling for as to what we want to do in that area. And so then what can we recommend to be done with respect to special events to make it consistent with the E-zone so we can make it a thriving economy and business community and residential community on a year-round basis. And myself, as we look towards Bike Week here and such, itinerant vending is an issue that I think we should look at. I think parking is a key issue, and we got all this empty, underutilized parking that's out there, but we also need to look at planning future parking if this is successful and such. We have noise issues and the integration between the businesses and the neighborhoods. We got the hours of operation for special events, and how, what hours should they actually be operated to be consistent with the adjoining neighborhoods. Those are the issues that I'm contemplating looking at, and I would like the board's input as to what other issues that you all think we may want to look at as we go through Bike Week. We could all go out, experience this ourselves, and get some current knowledge on it, and then come back and be prepared to take more public input and discuss these things and make some recommendations. Anybody have any ideas of additional areas of concern we should look at for special events with respect to the E-zone? Or did I list them all?
I think that is.
No, I think you list them all, but I have a question, I guess, for Reed or Ben. How did the chamber become the basically the lead organization? Why is not Bike Week managed and operated by the city of Daytona Beach? How did the Chamber of Commerce become the head of this thing? I understand how Biketoberfest came along, but how did the chamber get hold of Bike Week?
I think that precedes both of our time here. Tracy might know better than either one of us.
Staffing, volunteer hours, overhead.
And money.
Well, there's not enough money to cover what it would cost the city. I don't care what they get at the chamber. There's not enough money to cover what it would cost the city in terms of having staff. It's another department. It's like adding Homeland Security, you guys. It grows government. And so the chamber was there when all of this discussion was taking place, and it was a viable alternative.
Okay.
That was
Got my
it.
answer.
It was a very viable alternative. Default, yeah. Yeah, well, it's
And they
by
also,
default, but it was a viable alternative.
and I remember back then, they also were setting up a lot of little subcommittees looking into the issues.
Yeah.
I mean, they set up subcommittees not only for Bike Week, for BCR, for Spring Break,
And you had city business, chamber, I mean, you had so many people involved in those task force. Paul McKittrick and I sat in a lot of those task force meetings together, the VCB, and it's just what was worked out. It made sense at the time.
Okay, then I would suggest that somebody from the chamber should be at all these ongoing discussions when it comes to.
Jim Cameron would have a great, he's as historical as Paul is.
Yeah, in fact, that's something I had suggested, so particularly when we come back. Because I think I've just listed that the management of Bike Week events as something for a topic for discussion. Any other suggested areas of concern to be taken a look at?
Mr. Chairman, let me ask Tracy why the event can't be structured by the city so that it pays for itself. I mean, I've never heard of.
When I was on the commission, just let me tell you one thing. When I was on the commission, we actually finally developed a special events ordinance. There wasn't an ordinance, there weren't fees, it just sort of happened and it kept costing. When it was originally structured, those permit fees that were put into the ordinance were to cover that. There were outside police details, there was an hourly for that, there was I don't know how long it's been since it's been looked at, which is why I think the commission's looking at it now. But back in 1995, you know, that's what it was meant to do. And that was the first time fees were even collected to start doing that. So it started out that way, but I don't know. I haven't been involved in so long. I don't know when it was last examined.
So it wasn't the only option. It was an option the city chose rather than.
No, when the city first did it, the city thought there was all this stuff on, these were the costs, this is what it would take to cover the cost, this is how it would be done. That was the mindset, and that's how it was set up, to cover the costs.
And it didn't cover the costs.
I
and so-
haven't been involved since then.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happened since then.
I mean,
since
from just a
97.
business perspective, I mean, you obviously, if you're a business and the city is a business and you're going to do an activity, you certainly aim at breaking even or making money. I can't imagine that the reason the city gave the events to the chamber was because it couldn't come up with a fee structure that made it break even, and the chamber can. I don't understand the reasoning.
I don't think that's the case. I think they came up with the fee structure, and it all goes through to the city, and the chamber was the facilitator because they wanted the event. And, you know, if you look back in '05, they were bringing in 151,000 to the city for Bike Week, presuming that that was 100% participation, and now it's down to 82,000 for last year. And I do believe the costs have probably gone up in that period too, and it'll be real interesting to see what the city believes the actual costs are for the events.
I don't fault the chamber for working hard and doing a good event, and I think they should be making some money as a result of it. I know there's been, Tracy, I sat here for a couple of years hearing dialogue between you as a commissioner and the chamber about money raised during the event that was not subject to review by the city because it was raised by the foundation of the chamber. So we're getting net figures, we're not getting gross figures on these events. And my point is that I'm sure the chamber isn't doing it to lose money.
Well, and neither was the city when they started. No one was doing this to lose money.
But I think what Gary's getting to is that needs to be part of the discussion going forward here is how much is the chamber grossing and netting off Bike Week, and why can't we bring that under house? I mean, granted, there's some stuff that the chamber does, but the city still has to pay for the police. The city still has to pay for the fire. The city still has to send the code guys out there at 2:45 in the morning to make sure the music's turned out. I don't see the chamber out there doing that.
No,
So the
and
city
that's what
still
those fees are supposed to cover.
Well, there. So
Right.
we need to look at the whole fee structure, the whole cost of putting on the event, and see if it can't be brought back under the city as a whole, instead through the Chamber of Commerce.
And the answer might be that the chamber has does a better job at a cheaper price. That could be one conclusion.
You're right,
but I think the point is that something we could
But
look
I think
at.
the chamber's making a lot of money off of the event. I'm just saying it because that's my opinion. I don't know if I may be wrong. I doubt they're losing money on this. But for what the city puts into it, I don't think we're getting a return, even on the low figures that we had from last year.
I know, but it might be a matter of changing the fees that the city actually collects. Helen Rieger, if I recall, she was originally hired to oversee that. It's not just police, it's not just SCAR, it's not just the things we have fees for. It's a department.
Okay, I would like to know what goes on inside that department then.
The department is the chamber.
I understand.
Because
I understand that part of it. I want to know what that small little part of the
chamber
chamber
that you got to
does
ask
for
the
Bike
chamber.
Week.
That you got to ask the chamber.
That's why I think the chamber should be
Okay.
part of these discussions going forward.
Okay, Teresa can.
Thanks. The city commission, I believe, just looked at this issue and reaffirmed its decision to keep Bike Week with the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can check the record, but I believe that to be the case.
Yeah. This city commission.
This city commission.
Yeah.
You got a
Okay.
point.
All right.
I just don't feel comfortable making projections forward.
Right.
Maybe
All
you
right.
know more than I know,
Right.
but all I can speak to is what I.
Do you really want me to answer?
I think
Teresa, all I'm saying, I may be totally wrong.
No, I just think the
as a
city
business
commission
person, I
has
wouldn't like
spoken
to
on
see-
this issue for
Okay.
this event.
I'm not talking about this year at all. I'm talking down the road.
All right. Any other board discussion with respect to suggested issues to look at? I've also now written down the fee structure as something to talk about when we get back together.
Mr. Chairman, for those of us who watched the police chief make a presentation to the commission 2 meetings ago about the beating his budget gets from special events and his request to ask people involved in special events to put a deposit up against which he would debit extraordinary expenses, tells me, at least from the law enforcement angle, that we're losing.
Oh,
And I actually heard the police chief on the radio saying, I guess, that they tried an assessment to the bars on Main Street, but the way it happened wasn't equitable, so they're going to revisit it. And I
Bless you.
don't know the details of what that was. You might know more. I don't know, but he was saying that on the radio.
All right, thank you, Dino. I'd like to ask if there's any public that would like to make a comment with respect to a suggested area of concern for the E-zone area with respect to special events that we've not listed as a little list here. If you just want to say the same thing, I would prefer let's not do it. But if you got a fresh idea, I'd appreciate a quick, fresh idea.
Teresa, you had your hand up, Teresa.
I'm sorry, Teresa, did you say?
I think we moved on.
Okay.
John Nicholson, 413 North Grandview Avenue. There was a discussion about moving the vending off of Main Street to A1A to allow those vendors, or those people, the businesses along A1A to also profit by it. You may want to ask and discuss whether that's a possibility.
Expand or contract it, okay. Yes. Name and address, please.
Jordan Clancy, 3822 Sunset Cove Drive, Port Orange, Florida. Sorry, Port Orange. I'm also the head coach of lacrosse at Father Lopez High School, the exclusive provider for the sport of lacrosse in the county at the moment. And so
As I understand.
Yes. So my suggestion is actually a lacrosse tournament at the Ocean Center. I know you guys actually want to use the Ocean Center a little more, and so I have an idea to bring down some college teams, NCAA Division I, and then down the list to play at least a game at the Ocean Center to utilize it. So I just wanted to state that, but also then look forward to building a relationship with you guys to talk more about that.
Well, there's probably not much we as a board can do with respect to that.
To the Ocean
Isn't that the E-zone?
It's in the E-zone.
But it's
But
in the Ocean Center.
The Ocean Center is a county facility, so you have to deal with the county with respect to the use of the facility and their rental rates and all that kind of good stuff. We love those kind of events, okay?
Gotcha.
I think there's some people that really like the idea of more sporting events of that nature and such.
Okay.
I was just telling Dave, I understand the Race Across America, which is an endurance racing thing, is coming to Daytona Beach this November or so.
With the Port Orange winner for the past 3 years.
Well,
That's correct, yes.
yeah.
Mr.
From-
Chairman, also the Halifax Area Advertising Authority, which is county and distributes proceeds from the bed tax, is very, and there's a sports authority
Oh, okay.
that's housed there.
There we go.
And I'd be happy to.
Thanks, Mr. Libby.
to-
Yeah.
That's where I was kind of
Give me
going. We may have
give me
some
your name
ideas
and
to-
number, and I'll be
Talk to
happy
you after
to.
the meeting then?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you would, because I can help you out quite a bit on what you want to do. If you leave your name and number
Okay.
with the secretary here, and then we can contact you.
So Mr. Libby and Mr. Lamont. Mr. Webster, you know you have a college named after you?
Yes, I do. And I have a daughter at Father Lopez, so I know a lot of lacrosse.
I'll look forward to speaking to you then afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your desire to try to get that going. We need that.
Ken Paz, 33 South Oleander Avenue. I've been told many times that the boardwalk and the Main Street died when the driving was taken off in the area between Seabreeze and International. I was wondering if anybody had an opinion on that.
Thank you.
Well, if you
My
want me to
opinion, I
get
agree
back-
with you.
Well,
Any other public comments? Thank you. All right, we're going to move back to our agenda then.
the gentleman with the awning.
The
is in
awnings.
Did the awnings gentleman show up?
Yeah,
Yes,
he's here now.
he's
All right,
here.
why don't we go back to the awnings, and we have some questions and pick up the pace here.
And if you want to put that.
Name and address, please.
Gary Kaliopoulos, Beach Express, 101 South Atlantic Avenue, Daytona Beach.
All righty. I believe we had some questions. Truman, do you have some questions with respect to the architectural side of the project?
Earlier, when you weren't here, there was a picture circulated around on a
Yeah,
phone
she
to
just
us
put
of
it
a,
on the, I emailed it to her, so she's going to put it on.
anyway, I just wanted to point out that the picture you took is what you would ordinarily see with a standing seam metal hard canopy type awning. And the shop drawing here that you provided is trying to emulate more of a canvas type awning where they drop fascia on the front and with capped ends. And I think it's going to look really goofy on your building if you let this company do this to you instead of what you had in that photograph.
Don't trick it up.
And usually,
Unless maybe that's not a great rendering, because...
no.
No,
it's a fine
What is
rendering.
your
It's-
intention with respect to the awning? How do you want it to look?
The sides and the front.
Originally, I was going to have it emulate the Key West look, which was just, one
Just the
face
shingle
straight
front
down.
and the open ends?
And then I thought maybe if I angled the ends, maybe that might improve the looks somewhat. So
I was just trying to
I'm
convince
open
you that it
I'm
won't.
open to different
But
suggestions.
Do we not have that? We're not able to pull up that picture.
Wait, she's
I think it
pulling
was
it
just
up.
on
She
there.
is.
We're working on it.
We're
Okay.
working on it.
And then the only other thing I'd just ask, I do have unfortunately I don't have an ordinance with me, but I know that there is a specific height limitation in the design restrictions, and
I already have awnings there now at the moment, actually, and these would replace the existing ones that are
Right.
very dated.
right. And I suspect they do comply with that height ordinance. I don't know what that number is.
They
But
do.
I'm a little concerned about the one on the side there at the back, you see going up that driveway. Have you never had a car hit that one? Or a
No,
station or a van or?
no.
Because hitting it hard.
Yeah. The new ones that I
standing, seeing
actually,
metal awning is gonna be a lot different than hitting a soft canvas awning. It's
that's
gonna-
metal too.
They can't
It's
be.
just
bottom of
canvas
it is
surrounded
metal.
by,
No,
they're
I
both,
understand.
they're
There
both
it is.
aluminum framed.
Well, that gets to my next point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since you are changing it, and this, I assume you have to get a building permit to do this, Reed?
Yes, you do have to get a permit for
So
awnings.
I'm assuming they will handle the structural implications that,
Yes, for wind
because
load.
these new awnings are gonna have to resist 120
Sure.
miles per hour wind speed, which is gonna be a lot harder to do with a hard awning than it is with these, so.
That's
it's
already
gonna
been
be
brought up.
connected to the building, it's gonna be a lot more rigorous
Mhm.
awning than what you've got now.
Actually, that came up in discussion with Ray Webb from Kenco Awnings, and he's already engineered it as far as diameter of tubing and so forth to conform to hurricane requirements.
I have a question with respect to, it looks like is it a galvanized metal standing seam?
Yes.
And have you, just because I have a number of clients who are contractors or subs that have this stuff fail near the ocean.
Mhm.
There are certain brands and such that are built to withstand the salt air.
I agree with you.
Okay.
I'm not
So-
one to skimp. When I fix it, I usually like to fix it right the first time because I really don't care to maintain it after the fact when it starts to rust.
And the fact that you're now putting the galvanized metal on top of the aluminum, and you can get the reaction between the two metals, and you gotta use rubber grommets between and all that stuff, is all that in the plans and such?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Going back to what Mr. G was saying, since the picture's up there, what you're now talking about and what we have a picture of looking at that little thing, you're talking about enclosing the sides and putting a little lip down on the front of it? Can you see the picture?
That was the original idea, and
But-
then I came up with the revised edition, which would have the angled corners.
It would look like a hip roof, is what you're talking. It's going with a shed down and angled in on the sides, like going around the corner of a building, like a
See,
roof
I'm
would.
not,
I think,
Not exactly.
I've actually seen it utilized on a building, and it
Yeah.
looks pretty good.
I don't know.
I can do it either way, actually. I mean, personally, I would want it to look as appealing as possible, because I really put a lot of time and effort in my building.
Gary?
Is the redesign of the roof line driven by the new awnings, or is it incidental?
It's incidental.
You're gonna do
As far
that
as
any-
redoing the
Right.
canopy roof that I have above the front doors.
The barrel tile
Those have been giving me
details.
problems for a while.
Okay, so you would
then-
change those anyway?
Yes, yeah, well, those are gonna match the actual
Okay.
new awning material, which is
Okay.
the
That would have
metal seamed
helped.
roof.
yeah.
That would have helped.
Oh,
If
absolutely.
we had seen a sketch of that, then I think
Yeah,
everything has a tipping point.
Oh, okay.
This would have helped tip.
I got you. I had mentioned it to Reed before, actually. He said that made the world of difference, actually.
Because
So-
I was going to say, I tend to agree with Mr. G on the look.
The open awning look better?
That has that more Key West feel. It looks like I mean, it's like you tried to turn an awning into a canopy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really an awning. And that has a Key West look to it, and especially when you look across the picture we have here of Salty Dog, just that, clean metal look.
Well, it'll save me money, actually, so.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, can we get a motion then?
I have a question.
wait, there's a
Oh,
question,
I'm sorry.
Virginia.
Now, is that gonna be aluminum color or a color, like white or
It's
whatever?
gray.
Or
It
you
will
know?
be painted to look like, silver aluminum. Yeah. Well, sometimes you can get it clear coated. I want it painted to have as much protection as possible, so it'll have a silver aluminum look to it.
Okay.
So you're
Which
taking-
it'll be identical, I think, to Salty
You're
Dogs.
taking a galvanized sheet and then painting it to look galvanized.
They come painted. You can get them different colors. You can get them blue, you can get them whatever color you want.
Right.
Mr. Webster, I'll move adoption of the
Second.
request.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Well, wait,
Oh, I'm
we
sorry.
have, are you going to say something? Because you keep going to the,
Oh, sorry.
okay.
I was just going to say aye.
She kind of does this,
I know.
not this.
I'm just going to vote.
It's her tell.
Oh, okay, she was waiting, okay.
It's election season, maybe she's getting ready for one of these.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passed, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to number 7, DEV 2012-002 LDC text amendment with respect to the RDB 5 parking requirements. It's a continue from the last meeting with some revisions we requested.
There it is.
I think the changes hopefully that I've made here reflect what you said, what was in the minutes, all in an effort to try to make sure that we addressed the two major issues, and that was on Article 8, Section 2.5, off-street parking, that we did provide that 5-year provision in there. It's essentially like a sunset, and if we want to review it again before that and continue it, if there's some reason, we could do that or let it lapse. That 5 years is in the very end of that Section 8, where it says this provision will remain in effect until December 31, 2016. And that gives us a 5-year window. So if everyone's good with that, I'd move on to the next item, and that is regarding the provision for parking for new or expanded permitted or conditional uses. So we put that language in there to make that clear. Would allow the restriction to increase to 1,500 feet from the main building for this the remote parking. And what essentially this does for anyone who's looking at this is it just changes the parking requirements so that if we look at a new building that is going to come in, they have to meet the current requirements. But if you're an existing business out there now, you could, say, do some expansion, add something to your building, or if a business goes out and another comes in to that existing building, at least you have some flexibility here to be able to use that remote parking if you need it. And if you have a vacant building now, by essentially doing what we do on Main Street, you would not be required to have parking, but it would only be for those existing buildings that we have now out there on the street.
Now, Reed, is that only on Main Street or all of the area?
RDB 5.
Well,
I'm thinking of Joe Bear's property on A1A.
This is
RDB.
let me clarify. Main Street already does not require any parking, nor does I think it's the RDB4 down the boardwalk properties do not require that. And this would add one more zoning district to that list, but it would be only for the existing buildings, not the new buildings.
So that an existing building could use their on-site parking for expansion, as long as they were able to cover the need within the 1,500 feet. Is that correct?
They could, if they could accomplish all of that. I think we would allow some of that to happen.
Well, I'm not saying it's good or bad,
No.
I'm just saying.
Right, I think it's on a case-by-case. There may be a very good reason to do that, but I don't think the intent, when you look at intent, is to necessarily remove one parking space, and I don't think too many people want to remove what few parking spaces we have out there.
A little clarification.
Sure.
When you say expanded permitted, if somebody has, let's say, a facility, that they want to rent out, and they want to add, and so it's vacant right now, it would qualify with no parking, but then they want to add a sidewalk cafe like in front of their businesses, would that be an expanded permitted?
What happens is usually that additional table service will require more parking if you don't have it on site.
Yeah,
This
but
is-
I almost think that in that particular instance, that would be an existing building that, because you're not really expanding the floor area of the business. I mean,
Yeah,
you
you
are
are.
expanding the area of the business, but you're not expanding the actual building. I mean, I would, would think that the second part would be an expansion of the building, not adding, a few tables in front of, we're talking about a very limited amount of room anyways. I mean, people put tables in front of their own sidewalk between their front door and the sidewalk. I mean, it's not.
The Main Street Cafe.
Yeah, like the Main Street Cafe or something like that. I mean, which that's not the proper example because that's on a different zone and different. But okay, let's say Joe Bear's strip center. If he wanted to bring a fast food place into one of those facilities and he wanted to put a couple tables in front, I don't want this clause to cause him to now have to rent parking.
I didn't draft this, but I think Reed's intent is to discuss the parking that the expansion would require under the code in other circumstances. Right. We're only talking about some kind of change that would trigger new parking.
A physical
requirements.
change.
Okay,
What
I
changes?
Yeah,
I have a question.
I don't think,
I have a question too. If,
Wait, I wanted my question to
I'm
answer.
sorry,
though.
you thought you were finished.
No, it's not answered because I don't think a sidewalk cafe, like adding a couple tables, or having a smoking area for your restaurant, should trigger having now to provide parking.
Well, this wouldn't, if the code doesn't currently require it, this provision wouldn't have that effect.
You really have an option in that case. You got to look at what the provision calls for. There's also another piece of the code that's already in there that
About
allows for the
outdoor.
redevelopment board itself and these accessory, what we consider the accessory addition where you could actually waive some of those requirements. I don't know if waive's the right term, but it was put in there for a purpose of dealing with some of these smaller.
So we have the
Right.
flexibility to deal with it even if somebody
do.
interpreted it as being
Right.
onerous.
Absolutely,
All
you
right.
do.
and sidewalk cafes fall under
And
another.
I still have a question. If the building was damaged by hurricane
Yes.
or a fire, they would have to go under the new building codes? I want a clarification on that. I mean, Joe Bear's property, if that thing burned down and he wanted to rebuild it, or it was damaged in a
Then
hurricane,
it's-
would he have to meet the new parking requirements?
That's a good question. Again, like an abandonment of a building, you wouldn't be required to. And I don't have an immediate answer to that question.
Well, Reed, it actually talks
Where it
about
could.
newer permitted or conditional uses. So if the
Right.
use is the same and you're doing it.
Same building.
That doesn't
Right.
seem to be a trigger.
Right, if you're saying build the same building you had there before, I think that's different than if you're.
I
going to
want that
change
in the
it around.
record for his sake,
Sure.
please.
Okay. Any other comments or questions of the board?
Well, the new building has to comply with the new codes.
Yeah,
The building would, yeah.
But for the parking would be, still be a problem.
It might just be a repair.
Yeah, it'd be a major repair.
Yeah, major.
All right, no further board comment or discussion? Any public input with respect to this issue?
Good evening, Gilbert Mayara, 43 South Atlantic, Daytona. I just want to let the board, there's a lot of hype going on in Daytona. We get a lot of calls about what's going on in Daytona, about the E-zone, and we're trying to bring outside renters, outside businesses. Here's the biggest obstacle we get. Just this week, I had 8 people that I made deals with, shook hands for that particular building. But the minute they walked out of my office and they go to the city and they said they required parking, until that thing is,
So is this going to fix it?
that's it.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Any other?
I would just add one thing to clarify the record, Reed. I think you said when a business is abandoned, I thought in redevelopment areas, it does trigger things when it's
abandoned
more
would.
than 3 months. That just
Well,
needs,
let me explain. The abandonment.
if it's a non-conforming, right.
If it's a non-conforming.
Right.
But if
I
it's,
just-
when you have the 90-day and you say, I want to go back in
Right.
and open up with a permitted use, right now, because of parking, and you don't have it, you can't go back in.
Right.
Well,
John?
abandoned and empty are two different things, so I just
John?
want to be clear.
John Nicholson, 413 North Grandview Avenue. Since we already have 2 or 3 streets in the area that you don't require parking, I think Seabreeze, Main Street, the Boardwalk, it would be logical to do that for A1A. Secondly, you want to encourage sidewalk cafes, people being out on the street. I know, Timmy, your seats are constantly full. It's what we want. You see people sitting there all the time in front of Dunkin' Donuts, et cetera. The idea that if you have, and what I want to ask you also is, you have a $1,000 that you get off of your sidewalk cafe licenses. I would ask you to consider abandoning that. $1,000 is not a lot. Allow people up and down Main Street to use sidewalk cafes. I think that is great. It did wonders for Coconut Grove in Miami. I think it's something we should encourage. So if you could do that in your ordinances.
Thank you, John. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move acceptance of DEV 2012-002, the LDC text amendment for parking in RDB 5.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Is this,
Any further discussion?
is this acceptance or this is a recommendation that is made to?
Recommendation / acceptance.
Okay.
Yes, this is a recommendation to the commission. It'll be forwarded to the planning board, which will
Okay.
review it.
All right.
Thank you for clarifying that, Reed. We had a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. All right, moving on to number 8, DEV 2011-108, LDC text amendment, ocean front fence standards continued. Reed, any further quick comments?
Well, it's been 2 months since we had an opportunity to go back and look at this. I did include, I think, some detailed information about some of the plant materials that we could
Yes.
use if we wanted to take the fences down as an option. And it's something, if another building came down now, someone else could come in and establish the plant material. They may have to come in with a fence, but they could get ready and quickly, if they wanted to remove the fence, and they might put the fence in so that they could remove it fairly easily, even recover the material. So I think what you asked for, and I hope we delivered it in the way you wanted that, which is to send a message not only for the redevelopment area, but up and down all of A1A, outside of maybe our jurisdiction, but the request is really for the entire length of the ocean front that we address this. And you'll note one thing I thought, was an issue when we heard it at the commission level was wanting to have some consistency in the look. And so for the fence, we said that would be white. I mean, whether you painted it, whether it's vinyl, whatever, even though you could leave it natural look, we decided that white probably is the way to go, so everything is consistent up and down.
I like how you have the city making the determination whether they qualify, and it's given to them in writing prior to them being able to remove the fence. And I like that part a lot.
Okay. I think it looks consistent with what we discussed.
It's
Does
very-
anybody have any objections to the proposed language?
Do you want a motion?
Motion to recommend DEV 2011-108 LDC text amendment, oceanfront fence standards.
I'll second that.
And before we call it for first, any further board discussion?
Only comment is it's a very well done
Yes.
packet.
Yeah.
Just excellent.
Thank you.
And I love the background
Any public
information.
input on that who would object to it? Question, okay. Name, address, and question, please.
Dan Harshaw, 115 Lenox Avenue. I wasn't here for the whole presentation for this, but you're talking about putting fencing and then landscaping in front of that? Or is it just going to be fencing material only?
Well, we're talking about eliminating some of the fencing near the ocean front where the dunes have been restored and such, because we think the natural dune effect would be more attractive than a fence.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess my thing about that is, and I agree with you, it looks better, but what do you do about people on the weekends, they come up and they pull their cars up off of A1A? Like, I know we have that down by Ocean Dunes where you have a couple of the fences still up. They knock the fences down, they pull their cars up for the day, and they back off of A1A. How do you protect the property owners from that?
I think if the property is properly posted and and they have the right to then just come and tow the cars off of there.
Okay.
Or they could put up structural posts or things of,
And as far as parking on lawns and things like that, city ordinance prohibits that anyway. So like, I know where you're talking about, just south of Silver Beach.
Yes.
I can't figure out why they're not ticketed and towed in the first place, because they shouldn't be parked. They drive right over the curb.
Because I don't think it's posted, that's
Yeah,
why.
they're not supposed to per city ordinance.
Okay.
And actually, does it have to be posted?
No.
I didn't think so.
I thought it had to be posted that it would be
Well,
towed.
No, I thought that's something that the private property owner does themselves.
Well, then, in that case, wouldn't the property owner then, shouldn't he be getting cited for having illegal parking? Like for people parking on a lawn in front of somebody's house?
Code enforcement goes out there and they'll identify if there's a violation of parking
That
on
happens
the
every weekend.
improper
that's another
surface.
issue that should be dealt with, and maybe
Okay,
we'll want to look at
okay.
that.
Well, I guess another thing was too is, I guess, just maintaining it. I know that, the buffer of the fence kind of protected that, but then when you don't have a fence any longer, you have the trash aspect which comes off of A1A. And then also we see it a lot is where they don't maintain them at all, and we have dead trees and dead palm trees and things like that that are along the curb, and nobody's responsible to maintain it after they plant it or anything else. So that was my concern.
They're required with this with a site stabilization plan and such. It's an ongoing
Does
process.
the city have the teeth to enforce it though? Because they don't now.
Well, they'll have to put a fence up if they don't maintain the,
Okay, thank you.
come on.
Ken Paz, 33 South Oleander. Is there a safety factor with putting up bushes for people to hide behind and then jump out in the dark?
They can do that
They
from
can-
behind the fences.
Yeah. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. All right. Redevelopment projects update. And you have a little report for us in your agenda package?
Yes, I do. Let's see. Got to find everything now. Okay. First thing is the ice rink, and I do have a final report that, if I could ask to have that distributed. And we can come back to that, but that was something you asked for last time, and
Well, you want to just run through it quickly?
sure,
I mean, do we have it?
no, it's getting passed around now. So I just go very quickly to one other item and then come right back to it, is that let you know that back on January 18th, Joe's Crab Shack
Everybody gets one
parking
except
lots were
Except me.
approved
Gary.
for professional services, and the work's continuing, and in fact, there's going to be some work over on the Grandview lot. As I understand it, this week, we'll begin doing some work. We have until the end of April to get those parking lots ready. The other item is the E-zone master plan workshop that we had on January 25th. We are now scheduled on February 15th to have both the plan amendment that we had back in November pending. That's going to go to public hearing and a chance for approving an ordinance at that time. And then we'll get you all an updated plan at that, if that all happens. And then the other item is the comprehensive plan amendments would be transmitted to the state on that at that time if it's approved. You've already talked about Bike Week, and I just want to make sure that we've covered everything you wanted in there. I think we got there already. the Daytona Lagoon on the boardwalk had an announcement about a roller coaster. And I know Stan probably had some other things come up, but I know he wanted to just make sure that this board, which had approved the Ferris wheel, the amusement rides there in the first place, that he will be giving you a heads up about what he's trying to do over there with the roller coaster ride they're bringing down from Delaware.
I actually went to Tallahassee yesterday to meet with the Department of Environmental Protection, with Stan Manousos and Jim Morris, because there were turtle lighting issues involved and everything like that. And the meeting was positive thanks to Representative Dwayne Taylor. He was very, I'll just say, authoritative, and the meeting went well.
Good.
We don't have anything in writing yet, but anyways.
That's wonderful.
Okay, and then the last...
Which is Big John's best friend, I know that.
The next item I think y'all had asked for was the budget. And, where are we? Give us a picture of what's happening in the Main Street fund. So the first thing I want to do is just provide you with the chart that shows the revenue that comes in. And we had 3.5 million roughly budgeted as revenue coming in. And you'll see that that in your what you have is the handout of the PowerPoint, if you can't see it up there on the screen.
Reed, it's coming right now. It got buried over here
okay.
earlier on.
All right. Give you a minute to find us towards the back. And if you'll bear with me, I'll bring up the expenses. These are the budgeted expenses. That'll show you a breakdown between everything from the different types of administrative costs. These are all operational. This is not capital. I'll get to that in just a second.
Could you answer the question asked by a member of the audience about the cost of staff in the Main Street area and why there's a discrepancy between the 200-something budgeted in Main Street and 140 in the other ones?
Let me move to the next item, which, and I'll get right there to what you're talking about.
We don't have them.
We don't have them. It can't seem to come up.
Could we have the information placed on those screens, please? Is that possible? Thank you.
There. Thank you.
Might have to come up a little closer, but just wanted to let you know. And by the way, this information that we're going over now is the first quarter information on revenues and expenses, and you can see that right now we've burned through almost half the operating costs. I think you recall that with the police, that by the end of January they essentially were going to eat through all of their funds that they're getting from us.
Fiscal year?
The fiscal year started in
October 1st.
So really, we're talking about the first quarter ends at the end of the last year. Now we're a month into this. That's when they're running out of dollars there. They're still going to provide the same services. You heard that at the last meeting, and they'll just be reallocating their resources to make that happen.
How does the increment come in? Is this this $3.8 million? This can't be quarterly income. This has to be, or is this quarterly? This is the quarterly.
I don't believe it's quarterly. It comes in towards the end of the year when the taxes are collected. You get about 95%, and both the county and the city write a check. as well as Halifax Hospital.
This is 95% then of the anticipated income from.
That's correct. Anticipated is correct, because as you'll see, once we look at what we're actually going to get, it's going to be much smaller as we go forward, because there's about, I haven't seen the final number yet, but I know we're going to be close to 300,000 in what's anticipated from some actions that were taken with a couple of the condo associations over on the ocean front.
Right.
And where they have succeeded in getting a change in what they were charged. It goes back to 2006, so a court order essentially says you need to pay that back. The county, in doing so, has to then, the technique is they're going to withhold our revenues in the amount that we would otherwise get this year for that entire time.
So they make it up in 1 year?
They're going to make it up in 1 year.
In
So-
300?
Yeah, and we have no real say in that. That's just a decision, and it's done.
So, in other words, the property appraiser was assessing them for something they shouldn't have been assessing them, or at the wrong rate, and therefore now it's going back 3 year or whatever. And
It may be a little more complicated than that in all of their decision-making, but that boils down to, that's it, yeah.
Could I ask one quick question? On what we're looking at, when it says the first section, budget, and then actual first quarter, is that budget number, both the revenues and the expenses, is that the budget for the year or the quarter?
The
left-hand column, is
Okay,
that?
yeah,
Some is for the year and some is for the quarter.
No, the budget is for the entire year. And
Okay,
when you go to the
that's-
right side, that's the first quarter. And what I'm saying is
Okay.
we've gone through in quite a bit of money in some of those areas, like police should be at about 150 now.
Right, okay. I got
today.
it. I just wanted to be really,
Sure.
okay.
And debt service, we pay that in 2 installments, so the first installment is there. And so it'll be a little over 2.5 that we owe, so that when you see the 3.5 we collect in tax increment, there's only about $1 million left to work with, and what you do with it. And then you take out the operating, and you may not have very much left for capital or a new debt service if you wanted to look at doing something right now in a major project. So at this point, I would tell you that we had our high point a few years back, and now we're at a very low point, lower than anyone expected this would go.
Are there any dollars owed the trust fund from any other funds within the city?
I'm not aware of any debt. There's nothing on the books
No
to.
transfers or anything?
There's transfers we make to the general fund each year.
Those are
that-
budgeted, though.
Right, but it'll come back. It's, like police code, we account for that as a transfer, then it comes back to us based on timesheets, and everything we went through with that audit was to make sure that there was a technique to account for every one of those dollars.
For those of us who were new to the board, could you explain the debt service under expense, the
Sure.
roughly 6 million? Where does that go?
That goes to a bond payment and it's really a refinancing of several projects over time that were done with the Hilton and the Ocean Walk projects. And those were all combined for the public improvement part of those 2 projects that we were obligated to.
And for how many years are left on this?
I'm not sure exactly how many years, but I think we've got at
It
least
was 30
20
back then.
30,
Yeah, I know, I think, yeah, it was.
27, yeah.
I think we're at, it was refinanced again, and so I think we've got at least another 27, 8 years to go. I'd have to check that to make sure that that number would be
Now,
accurate.
what happens if the income falls below the required debt payment in this model? Is it a full faith and credit of the city backup, or?
I haven't read that part of it, but that's the typical way that any TIF bond it has a guarantee, is that there has to be the general fund backs up those.
Ben, do you know? Do you remember?
I thought I knew, but I guess I don't.
Because I didn't think it was a
haven't
full
read
faith. Tracy, do you
I
remember?
can't remember.
I think it wasn't. I think if the TIF funds fall below, then they fall below and they get made up later. Interest
Okay.
accrues.
We're
But
into
that's something
default,
that-
yeah.
That's something that.
Then it affects our bond rating.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's full faith on these.
The thing is, we saw this happen in South, or the Daytona Shores, and they ran into a situation because they were a newer TIF. The structure that they had with financing with the county, it very quickly turned into a problem when they built A1A and some of those parks, and all of that debt suddenly became a problem when, like our South Atlantic CRA, we are now underwater by more than $10 million in value, not taxes, but in value. What it means to us is we have zero on our books. We have no revenue coming in South Atlantic, so that's a real easy one to take care of here and showing you.
Yeah.
There's
Zero,
nothing there.
zero.
But what's always important, and I think is intriguing to everyone, is when you get to the capital project, because at one time I think we were hovering around $13–14 million in capital a couple years ago. We have now managed to spend those funds for some projects. We are now down to the bottom of the barrel there. So
Is there a reason we keep losing these on the screens up here?
because they want to see you on the TV. But I think if you would please, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Reed, I was under the assumption
That's
that
operating.
the capital, oh, maybe it isn't capital, that the stipends to stimulate renters on Main Street, that line item of money, what are we calling that?
Which?
That grant program for landlords.
The grant program, which really isn't for landlords anymore, we made a change in that grant program for home ownership. So that part's been changed.
So there's no longer any support for year-round leases on Main Street?
There is money for grants for residences if they're homeowners involved in that. There are also ways to take multifamily and convert it to a homeowner.
But no commercial,
But
no business?
there is commercial, yes.
Commercial.
There is, when we say commercial, I mean businesses, not multifamily. And for businesses, those, right now, we have about $20,000 in that fund for Main Street. It's not much. And for resident,
Where in the budget does it fall?
it falls in the operating.
Okay.
And if you look at the detail of that operating, that is really falling under what we call redevelopment operations.
Okay.
And that's why in the operating, I wanted to break that out a little bit. That 724, which shows up in our budget as 721, every time we get after the first quarter, they do some adjusting in the budget. So that's why there's a little bit of a discrepancy on the budget side. But the question that you had is under the salary and benefits, and if you got $204,000 in there, is that equitable in terms of Main Street versus someone else? So let me explain how that works. Of the 5 employees, including myself, that are in redevelopment, that are paid directly from this fund, we don't work outside of the redevelopment area, number one. We don't do other things for the city. We work for the agency, and through that process, we have, after the audit, created new timesheets that are very detailed by each redevelopment area. And we assign our time to when we're in that particular area, and that's all noted as to where we are. We have to keep very detailed timesheets of that. We also have that situation with police and code. You have to be able to say you're in that particular one of those 5 redevelopment areas. And then for a lot of things that we do that are not assignable to one particular one, because there's general administration, you're having meetings with someone, but you're not working in a particular area, that administrative cost is spread across all of the CRAs. Okay, there's not one place that you're going to be assigned. So we do that proportionate to the revenue coming in. The richer that CRA, the richer CRA is that has more revenue coming in, will pay more of that administrative cost, but it'll be proportionate to the ability to pay. That's the current way we break up that money. Now, when we talk about the amount that's in there right now, that's a budgeted line item, and at the end of the fiscal year, there will be a truing up of my time, all of those timesheets. We'll only be taking out what we actually assign over the year, and it may be less. We may be only charging $100,000 depending on real time in that particular CRA.
How do you handle South Atlantic?
South Atlantic is
well, I know, but they have to cost account their time. I mean,
right, and so it's being tracked, but we can't take any money out of there. So we're just simply tracking the time that we're in there, and it isn't much, because we're very. Let's put it this way. I find myself in South Atlantic on the weekends, and we only track 40 hours of my time or any of the other salaried workers. So we might be working 50, 60 hours a week, but you can only assign 40 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So we donate time,
yeah, okay.
if you will. I donate my time in the evenings as well. Well, unless I can figure out a way not to have to come in at 8 o'clock every morning. I haven't done that yet. Okay. But that really is how it looks, and you can see that we're from a time standpoint, and this is real time. This is about a week ago. We still had 78% of the monies still in there, so we're spending less than what we normally would in a quarter. If I could move on then to the capital. This is where we had at the beginning of the year, and this is the place where it carries over. Operating can't carry over. Right. So what happens is at the end of the year, that operating money, if there's more money, gets placed into the capital accounts. The budget, that $6.6 million, is now down to only $288,000 that's remaining and available, and you can see almost all of that is for peer-related expenses. So what I have basically left is in the East ISB streetscape line item for $36,000. I don't think we'll be building any streetscape on ISB anytime soon until we can replenish that account.
And
so
what would you do then? Transfer that toward, in the third quarter, that unused money to a line item that is doable with that amount of money, or do you just absorb it at the end of the year?
Well, it's capital. It'll roll over to the following year unless there is a request to have a transfer, because there have been requests over time, particularly to the pier from other.
Who makes the request?
Those requests can be made by different individuals that are in the staff that are managing the pier project, for example.
Okay.
And then the city manager would have to approve that kind of a request.
Okay, but that's not anything that we're involved in.
No, and in fact, you'll see a lot of this if you see a budget amendment. That is the commission
Right.
approves some of the transfer or the movement of money from one account to the next account when they do these quarterly budget amendments.
So that in good times, unspent money or money that was deemed unspendable in the operating budget gets transferred into capital.
That's correct. The end of the year.
Reed, could we ask that, you just mentioned that there's quarterly budget revisions or whatever and such with respect to it. Could we just kind of on a quarterly basis bring any of those to us so we're kept informed as to where things are at and where things are going?
Okay. If there's something that affects this fund?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, please. And on an annual basis, at the very least, we would like to see the budget that's being proposed and such, you know, as soon as it's in a preliminary form available so we can look at it and at least be informed. Do we have any further questions with respect to the budget?
Good report.
Thank you.
Just, Mr. Libby, if you'd like, I'll follow up and nail down the answer to your question about whether the bonds are full faith and credit. I'm going off of memory, but it's something I can look up and get back with you on.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. All right, moving on to board comments. Any board comments? We'll start with Teresa. Oh. We'll go to Truman next. Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a comment, and this has nothing to do with the fact that we're completely out of money. But I had a while back finished my 2-year term and asked Reed to find a replacement for me on the board, and I think he has done that. So this will be my last night here. And I don't know if you want to announce who it is or.
I can't because that is the job of the commissioners.
Oh, okay,
and they have
well.
an opportunity next Wednesday to go over all the applications that were submitted over the last year to appoint people to the board and to reappoint those of you who have requested. And I think all the incumbents have said they want to come back.
Except one.
Are all of us up? Are all of us up this year?
No.
No.
No. So,
Yeah.
we've had that correspondence, and if we didn't talk to you, you're okay. And you can also see on the website,
Yeah.
I know, for example, there is a case, I think, Dino, you were filling a term, and it was coming up this time, so you'll be back.
Bye, everybody.
It's going to be very short.
It was nice knowing you.
Well, Truman,
I believe I'm
on behalf
time
of the board, I
limited.
want to thank you for your services if this is the last
Right.
time we see
Yeah.
you here. But who knows, you may be back next month
Well,
for,
I've enjoyed it. It's been quite an experience after many decades of standing out there presenting my projects to boards like this. It's
And our former chairman, Virginia Brown, is term limited out?
Yes.
That's correct. And so in your case, we're going to want to ask you back.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's a tradition that we always like to recognize everyone that's been with the board.
Okay.
And so we'll have that opportunity. I've really appreciated the time with.
Okay,
Yes.
well, thank you.
and
Thank you.
Virginia, in the interim, do you have a comment?
No, I don't think so. It's been wonderful working with all of you over a period of time and trusted me with the chairmanship for a year. And I got to know a lot of wonderful people in our city for working with this board.
Well, thank you.
Hear,
Thank you
hear
for the
to
opportunity.
Virginia.
David? Anyone else?
Yeah,
Tracy?
of course. Actually, I want to say, I hope whoever ends up sitting in your chair is every bit, and actually I'm talking right now to Truman in terms of architecture, every bit as knowledgeable and as helpful. I have been coming to these board meetings a long time too, and I know Virginia has been at them. It has been a wonderful experience to have an architect who actually is here, is knowledgeable, participates, helps guide us. I think you're going to be a real loss,
Well,
personally.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. I do need for the record to say I'm not licensed in Florida, but I'm an architectural
But you know your stuff.
But, you know, in the 2 years, I think we've had, 7 projects, and 2 of them were parking lots. So, you know, from and I don't have the vested interest y'all do in all the political side of this. So
But that's a
it's
bit you
been somewhat
offer.
boring, quite frankly. But,
And
I know
then
that's a sign of the times. And, we gotta live
and
with
then
it.
my other comment about Mr. Berger in terms of donating time, it's nice to know that we're not the only ones sitting up here that donate our time.
Here, here.
That's right.
Any further comments? Being none, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Hey, Gilbert.
I know. When that was about
It's nice seeing you again.
Nice seeing you. It's a pleasure having you here.
For some reason, it didn't look to the...
Yes, it was.